Hello there, and welcome to the Meaningful Stitch. This is episode 31, and I am Amy Palko, and I'm coming to you from Edinburgh, Scotland. And this is my digital home from home, a place where I get to share with you my knitting practice and my knitting projects. It's been a little while since I've sat down and done a ordinary, straightforward podcast such as this. The last two episodes were pretty special. The one before was when I was with my mum as my special guest, and included the travel vlog footage at the end of our trip to France. And the one before that was the summer knitting special, where I had my local yarn shop owner, Jess, from Ginger Twist as my special guest, and we were going through lots of different options for summer yarns and summer designs. So yeah, it's been quite a while since we've actually sat down and gone through my works in progress, and I've got quite a few finished objects. But before I get on to all of that, I'm going to draw a card for us. And I'm drawing it today from a new deck to me, which is this one here, and it's called The Wild Unknown Alchemy, and it's by Kim Krans, and it's actually the fourth oracle deck that she has brought out. The first was the Wild Unknown Tarot, and then she brought out the Animal Spirit deck, and then the one after that was the Archetypes deck, and she's now finishing that series with this deck here, the Alchemy deck. Now the Alchemy deck is extremely beautiful. For one thing, it's packaged exquisitely so, and it's quite unusual because the cards are shaped in a hexagon like this. I'll just show you a few of the cards before I show you the one that I've drawn, because they're really very beautiful. They're all this collage style of art. Here we go, and they've all got this alchemy theme. Here we go. Aren't they beautiful? So I have drawn a card for us today. Let me find the book. And it is this one here. So I drew the peacock's tail. Isn't that glorious? And I'm just going to read the words from the guide so that we know a little bit more about this particular card. The peacock's tail. Full vision, the spectrum, inclusivity. The peacock's tail is a sacred image in alchemy. The mesmerizing display of tail feathers opens to mark the alchemist having shifted from single to multiple perspective. This is a great achievement. The alchemist has opened 1,000 set of eyes instead of one. They've discarded black and white thinking and allowed the full spectrum of colours, nuances and solutions to come into the fold. Creative solutions to complex social and political polarities can be found in this sacred space. The force field of possibilities has opened, and the alchemist has entered a new paradigm belonging to multiplicity, dimensionality and inclusion. Utilise this perspective for positive change while it lasts. When falling back into black and white thinking, as any alchemist will do, envision the splendour of the peacock's tail. Each feather contains a shimmering universe of possibility. And one of the recommendations for this card is, bring as much colour in as you can today. Experiment. Use it as a therapeutic means of expression and a way to loosen up rigid thoughts. Well, my loves, I have lots of colour for us today. But actually I'm going to start with a little piece of news, which is also colour related. The Perth Festival of Yarn is coming up in September. It's going to be on the 10th and the 11th. And Eva, who organises the Perth Festival of Yarn, invited me to do a talk all about how to curate colour palettes. And she asked if I would also share my collection of Stephen West shawls. So of course I said yes. So my talk is going to be on the 10th of September at Perth Festival of Yarn. You can purchase your ticket at the same time as you purchase your general admission ticket. And I think it's going to be really fun, and I can't wait to show you my collection of shawls in person so that you get to see just how incredibly beautiful they are and how the lovely colours really show up and shine when they're not mediated through this screen. So I've actually got a few more shawls to show you. because I have, like I said, I've got quite a few finished objects to share with you this time. So all notes, all links and details will be included in the show notes below. Show notes with photographs will be included in the Patreon link, so if you want a bit of a closer look at anything, you can click on the Patreon link, and that is completely free to access for all. If you would like to support this podcast, you can absolutely do that by becoming a Patreon, and you'll access all the details to that through the links below also. Okay, gosh, that was a lot. So we'll start off with what I'm wearing, I think. So you would have seen this on the summer knitting episode that I did a couple of, well, actually, my goodness, it must be about at least 6 weeks ago now. But it's knitted in Kalinka linen, which is a 4-ply. I think the pattern, which is a beautiful pattern by Leila Raven, originally used a Quince & Co. Kestrel yarn, which I think is actually an Aran weight. So I held 4-ply double, so which would have given me, I suppose, like a DK weight, but it's knitted at such a loose gauge and open gauge that it didn't really make that much difference, I don't think. And the colour is called Emilia. Like I said, it's Kalinka linen yarn, which is 100% linen. It's lovely and soft. It is a little bit hard on the hands in the knitting process, but it really softens up a lot with the washing and blocking, and it feels very sort of silky and drapey and cool to wear, which is lovely because at the moment the sun is shining full force through the window, and I've kept the windows closed in order to limit the amount of noise disruption. So it's getting rather warm in here, so I'm glad I opted for linen today. As you can see, it's got this large lace panel down the front. I'll just stand up so you can see it a little better. There we go. And you can also see that it's got a lot of positive ease. This is a very drapey top. It just, it doesn't cling too close to my body, which is good because, again, you want it to keep you cool rather than keeping you warm. But you can see there's a lot of excess fabric here, but I really like it. The back of it is just plain, although I have seen some others use the lace panel on the back as well. And the other thing to say is that it is a seamed pattern rather than being knitted in the round. And I suppose you might be able to convert it so that it is knitted in the round, but then you would have to convert the lace pattern from being knitted flat to being knitted in the round. So there we go. This is the Kalinka. I think I knitted it in the Kalinka. This is the Deschain, knitted in Kalinka by Leila Raven. I knitted it in 2019, and the yarn was gifted to me by my friend Jen for my 40th birthday. So it's a really lovely piece. I really like to wear it in the summertime. I find it's a very easy piece to throw over the top of dresses or to wear with a camisole underneath and my jeans. But yes, it's a very lovely relaxed piece. So perfect for today. So that's what I'm wearing, but what have I finished? Well, as you know, when I last spoke to you, I was in France. And we got the train all the way down to France, and we got the train all the way back up to Edinburgh, which was a lot of knitting time. And then when we got home, unfortunately, my husband tested positive for COVID. So that meant that we self-isolated. I continued to test negative, and then he tested negative after a week. So I continued to self-isolate for another week after that, just to make sure that I hadn't picked it up, but I continued to test negative consistently throughout, so I didn't have any symptoms. But that did mean that we were stuck in the flat for quite a long time after all of that travel, which meant I had a lot of time on my hands, and so I put them to good use. So I have finished the Garter Goodness by Stephen West, and this is in Kinross lace, and it's in the colour Wildflower. It's 100% lamb's wool. It is absolutely beautiful. As you can see, you'll probably be able to see my hand behind there. It's very drapey, it's a very light fabric. This is the third Garter Goodness that I have knitted. The first two were both in 4-ply, fingering weight, single ply merino. And they really have like quite a drape to them. They're quite heavy, Whereas this is very light. So this is much more appropriate, I think, for like a summer shawl, or maybe like a transition piece as we move in or out of slightly warmer weather. But I hadn't knitted a Garter Goodness before that was all one colour. Both the ones that I've knitted before have been in a gradient fade. So they've been 4 skeins of yarn that I've faded throughout the fabric. Whereas this, all one shade. And I don't know about you, but I just absolutely love this colour. I cannot get enough of it. I just want to drink it in. I love the name of it, Wildflower, because it really does, I think, resemble the colour of bluebells or harebells, as they're sometimes known. And actually we've got some Serbian bellflower that have been flowering in our back garden, and they're this colour as well. So it really is a colour you see quite often in nature. And I really love being able to spot it out and about, and then being able to work with it so intensively, and then to have this experience of draping it around myself and really drinking it in. And so this has become a firm favourite. I think I've mentioned before about this pattern that I know that some people are not that keen on the shape, because they think this little bit up here, this, which is almost like a small triangle, I suppose, is a little bit unnecessary. And so they quite often, you'll see sometimes that the people have missed this part out. But I would say that's because it's a misunderstanding about the shape of the shawl, because we quite often think of, we look at a shawl shape flat, and we don't consider how the shawl is going to fit and sit upon the body. And one of the wonderful things about this little triangle here, and why I would advocate for you knitting it, is that you can fold it down so it sits like that, and then as you wrap it around, it sits and it gives a little bit of extra fabric just at the neck. And I don't know about you, but for me, this part here, this on my upper chest, is quite often where I get cold. So if I'm out and about, I'm waiting on a bus or whatever, that's where I tend to feel the cold, which is why I love shawls so much. So that little bit of fabric there is absolutely perfectly placed for me, and so I would absolutely advocate, as I say, for knitting it. It's a shawl that just sits so nicely, and like I said, I do know that it looks almost like a strange shape when you lay it out flat and when you're knitting it, but actually it sits so beautifully. Like I could get a little shawl pin there and just pin it, and it would just sit over my shoulders like a hug. Isn't it gorgeous? I'm so pleased with it. This used up, gosh, probably almost entirely 2 skeins of the Wildflower yarn. So there's a lot of knitting in this, probably about 1400 meters or so. And so it is a lot of knitting, and long rows as you get to the bottom. And it is cast off with an I-cord, and an I-cord with a lot of stitches is a bit of a labour of love, and I will talk more about that in a second. But it is really worth it because it gives this beautiful finished edge to it. I washed it and blocked it, which means that I soaked it all, and then I squeezed out, it didn't wring, squeezed as much water out of it as I possibly could. And then I sandwiched it between 2 towels, and then I rolled it up as a big long sausage, and then I stomped along all of the length of the sausage, of the towel sausage, and to try and get as much moisture out of it as possible. And then I removed the shawl from the towels, and I laid it flat on, I have blocking mats, which are basically, I think I picked them up from Amazon from the toy section, because they're those foam jigsaw pieces that kind of slot together. And so I create an outline. So I try and leave the middle free of blocks to try and create a little bit of air and a little bit of space underneath where I'm going to block the shawl. I create the outline, and then using pins and wires, I pin out the shawl and really try and get like a good block on it. And then I leave it all to dry. And then this is the effect. And what happens when we do that is it evens out our stitches, you can see, and it creates the beautiful shape that you want. It creates more drape, and it really kind of creates a beautiful finish. So it is well worth, I think, washing and blocking in general, but especially a shawl, you know, because it's so visible, it's so noticeable. We really want it to be looking its best, and washing and blocking is one of the ways in which we can do that. So yes, highly recommend that you do that, because I think it worked out really well with this one. So there we go, that's finished object number 1. But that's not all that I have. You might also remember in the last episode that I was working on a Manus by Yamagara. And this is a lovely pattern. And this is my finished object. Now it's showing up as black, but actually, see if I can get a more accurate colour. You can maybe see it just at the bottom there. It is a very dark navy blue, like an inky indigo. And at the bottom here, it's this lovely golden yellow. And I think it's yellow turmeric by Purl Soho in the linen quill. And this is a mohair acrylic. And I wish I'd used something else. It's a complete honest truth. I will show you the one that I had knitted before, which was knitted in, again, the Purl Soho linen quill in bright flamingo. And I knitted the upper part in LanaGrossa Silkhair in the colourway Sari. And this is the mohair silk. It drapes really well, it sits nicely on the body. My one complaint about this particular one is that I knitted it a size too small. So it does fit, but it didn't fit with the amount of positive ease that I really wanted. So I decided for this next one that I would go up a needle size. However, what I did not then take account of was that my yarn that I was using for this top part here was not a lace weight silk mohair. Instead, it was probably DK weight mohair and acrylic. So is far too big, and absolutely I did want it to be a larger piece, but because it's knitted in this particular fibre, it doesn't drape. It just kind of sits on my body, and it kind of looks like I'm wearing, I don't know, like a box or a bag. These shoulders pieces here just kind of stand up on my slopey shoulders. So it just doesn't fit me, is the problem. Which is a shame, because like I said, I used this linen quill at the bottom here, and I'd used the linen quill at the bottom of the first one, and that's because they were both leftovers from my half and half triangles wrap, and so I thought it would be really lovely to use the two leftover colourways as the lower half of the Manus. So none of this is anything about the pattern, it's everything to do with my own personal choices about which size to knit and which yarns to use. I will absolutely knit another one, I think, when I've got over the disappointment of that one. But yes, I have lots of other mohair silk lace weights that I could use, and they would make really beautiful Manuses. And I've seen other people's. Jess from Ginger Twist, like I said, who did the special summer knitting episode with me, has completed a couple, and both of hers are absolutely beautiful and fit her really well. So I just wanted to really share it with you, because, you know, not everything we knit is perfect. Not everything we knit works out, and that's okay, because that's part of the practice. You know, the whole point of a practice is that we keep returning. We keep returning to our needles, to our yarn, to our creativity, to our inspiration, and we continue to make choices and we move forward. And so I am chalking this up as just part of my own personal practice. I'm going to release it, I'm going to let it go, I'm maybe going to find a home for it, see if somebody wants it, but it doesn't fit me, so I'm going to, and I don't even know if anybody would actually want it because of this particular fabric that's created. It would certainly be a very warm summer top. People might expire in the summer wearing it. So, yes, I'm just going to chalk it up to experience and set it to one side, and I will knit another at some point in the future. Yamagara also brought out a secondary pattern at the same time as she brought out Manus, and it's called Lapis. It is knitted entirely in fingering weight yarn, and I absolutely love that shape. There was somebody who did a kind of modified version of it. I think it included sleeves, and they made it slightly longer in the body, and I realised that actually it's like my dream shape for a sweater. So I will absolutely knit one of those in the future, and I did buy the pattern at the time, so it's sitting in my library. So there will absolutely be more Yamagara projects in my near future. So that was the second finished object. The third finished object, I know, 3. The third finished object isn't actually one that you've seen before. Because I cast it on after I arrived back home from France. And that said, it is huge. So I've obviously just been knitting because, yes, it is a power of work. This is my second Fantastitch. Isn't it glorious? Even if I do say so myself, I am spectacularly pleased with how this one worked out. I actually wore it to a wedding at the weekend, and I'll tell you a bit more about that at the end. But that was what I was really hoping, is that I would be able to complete it and wear it to that wedding. So I did have a little bit of, well, not so much a deadline, but a desire. So that really kind of spurred me on. It's knitted in Fonty Moustache, which is a merino mohair silk blend, which my mum picked me up 3 colours from her local yarn shop, which we also visited in the previous episode, My Little My, which is owned by Stephanie. And so mum picked up this lovely dark pink and this light pink and this kind of blue-grey shade for me. And so when we were back over, I picked up another couple of balls in white. And then I was kind of, when I got back home, I was kind of looking at my stash and trying to decide what colours I wanted to add to those 4 colours of fingering weight. Now the pattern actually calls for 7 colours altogether. That would be 3 skeins of fingering weight and 4 skeins of Sari. Now, instead of doing that, I had 4 skeins, or actually I had 8 balls, but I had 400 metres of 4 colours in fingering weight. And so I was thinking that I might use 3 balls of mohair that would balance it out, which is what I did with my previous Fantastitch, which I completed round about this time last year actually, which I will just show you now. So this was the first Fantastitch, you've seen it before, but this uses 7 colours, and again that used up 4 skeins of, well, 4 sets of 400 grams of fingering weight and 3 different colours of mohair. So I had this burgundy shade, this bright pink, and I had this sort of watermelon coral shade, and all the rest was in fingering weight. So I had the idea that's kind of what I wanted to do again with this, but the more I looked at it, the more undecided I became on what balls of mohair from my collection should I use, because I have a few different options. And actually the amounts of those colours in the shawl are such that you could get away with just 1 ball of mohair. So instead of doing that, I decided that I was going to use up one of my precious skeins of hand-dyed mohair. I bought a skein from Qing Fibre, and I think it was their Valentine's skein from February 2021, and it was called XOXO, and I thought it was so beautiful that I bought myself a skein. And I realised that actually with the meterage I could get away with using 1 skein of mohair which is about 420 metres, I think, to stand in for 3 of the colours in the Fantastitch design. So I decided that it was going to stand in for D, F and G, and the A, B, C and E were all going to be the Fonty Moustache. So I've actually only used 5 colours in my Fantastitch, but because it's a variegated mohair, I think actually it gives the impression that there is a lot more. So I just love how that variegated mohair is working with all 4 of the fingering weight yarns. I love this section here, which is like the painting bricks, where you've got the pale pink and the variegated mohair bricks. And then I've got quite a few sections here where you just have like a bit of garter there in the variegated mohair. We've got this lovely section here, which is the V's and the garter of with the slipped stitches. And then of course this section here, which I think is possibly one of my favourite sections, which is a very small section really at the beginning, but it's these little cables with slip stitches. So I'm really, really pleased with how this has worked out. It is absolutely massive. I did measure it, and it is 2.5 metres long and about 90 centimetres deep. So it is really big. I think at the end I had 793 stitches. And of course you're doing the chevrons here. And I had a real issue trying to decide what I was going to do for my I-cord bind off. I originally decided that I was going to do it in the dark pink, so I knitted the setup row for the I-cord in the dark pink, and then I began the I-cord, and I probably got to about here before thinking actually that's a mistake, it's not working. So then I had to rip all of that out, including the setup row. And then I knitted the setup row in the pale pink, this shade here. And then I knitted the I-cord with the pale pink yarn, and the last of my variegated mohair held with it to create this really beautiful effect. And I'm so pleased. I'm so pleased that I took the time to rip it out, to make a different choice. Actually, I ripped it out in the evening, and I waited until the next morning until I had proper light to make my colour decision. And I'm really very pleased that I made the effort to do that, because I think the result is really, really beautiful. I'm kind of thinking of this as like a back to school stationery shawl, because it reminds me of the colours that you would see like in your stationery. I'm sure I used to have a pencil case that was plastic, but it was kind of these kind of iridescent colours. And then I think of this colour here and this one here like the colours of the jotters. Or sometimes, you know, you get your eraser and it's got like a split down the middle, and they're different colours on either side, and these two colours are quite often seen in those. Or the colour of your rubber at the end of your pencil. And then of course, you know, in your school bag sometimes your highlighter pen would leak all over your things. So that's how I think of the little fluorescent splashes of highlighter yellow. But it's beautiful. It is, I'm going to have to take it off because it is very warm. So, but it is glorious. The silk content of the Fonty Moustache, it creates a really lovely drape and a beautiful sheen. It is just absolutely beautiful. I will be bringing this shawl and this shawl and this shawl, as well as many others, along to my talk in Perth. So if you would like to come and see these in person and just see how incredibly beautiful these colourways are, then I would love to see you there. So hopefully I will. You can maybe let me know in the comments if you're planning on coming along. But yes, there we go. That's the Fantastitch now in, see if I can get this up here too, in 2 colours. Because what's better than one Fantastitch? Two Fantastitches. I'm still struggling on how to say Fantastitch. Fantastitch? Fantastitch? I'll need to decide before September how I'm going to say it. So there we go. That is my finished objects. It's 2 shawls, which were huge successes, and a top that wasn't so much. But I do have some projects on my needles. Now, you probably are not that surprised that because I've been knitting these really big epic shawls that I don't really have a lot of progress to show you on my other whip. But I will show you anyway because I did make some progress. I am knitting the Long Summer Cardie by Jochi Locatelli. I'm using Holst Coast, which is their wool cotton blend in the colourway Candy. I have it as a cone. And my contrast colour is Holst Super Soft in their bleached white. So for the stripes. And I will show you where I'm at. Like I said, not massively further on than when you last saw it, but a little bit. So this is where we're at. This might actually have to get put to one side and brought back out again for next summer. I'm not sure yet. But I think last time I spoke to you I was maybe about there, and so now I've added, I'm down here, I'm on the next Twisted Rib section. It is really, really lovely. As the descriptor, as the title says, it is a long summer cardie. So I do have quite a lot more knitting on this. It is not a cropped piece. Instead, it is really quite long. But it was the project that I knitted on most when I was on holiday, and have not really knitted a huge amount on it since I got home. But it feels lovely in your hands, particularly I think when it is this wool cotton blend. It feels quite light and a bit cooler to work with, which is nice. The Holst Super Soft it's very hard to say today. The Holst Super Soft in the bleached white is a little bit puffier, I think, than the Holst Coast, which is like here. And then I'll show you the Coast, the Super Soft. Where's the end? I've lost the end. There we go. And so the stripes are kind of like standing out. You might not see. This is slightly thicker than this, and this also has like a smoother handle to it, and this is a little bit woolier. Well, it's a lot woolier. So because of that, I think the stripes are really standing out. They're really popping. So it's created in such an interesting way. The cast on, you just like casting on a very small number of stitches, and then through the magic of short row shaping and then a pickup, which I'm really pleased with because it kind of creates almost like an invisible shoulder seam. You can see there. It was just so fun. And then when you finally joined up underneath the arms, I really did feel as though I'd like completed a complex jigsaw puzzle that I'd been expertly guided through the process of. So it was a huge amount of fun, and there was a lot of joy in putting all that together. And of course now I'm just like back and forth. There's no more construction joy to be found, really. It's just the work of the knitting now. But it is quite comforting knitting to do while I'm watching the television, apart from these sections here, which are created with Twisted Rib. I had originally thought actually that these were like single colour brioche sections, but they are not. They are Twisted Rib. And so I find that I need to concentrate a little bit more with Twisted Rib. I can't really watch and concentrate on the television when I'm knitting Twisted Rib. So maybe that's why I've stopped in the middle of a Twisted Rib section. But that's my long summer cardie in Holst Super Soft and Holst Coast. And I will crack on with it, but I do have some things that I'm working on right now which are kind of taking precedence. So I might have to leave that for a little while and then come back to it. I did have another work in progress, and I wasn't sure whether I was going to share this with you or not, but I will. I took this with me. We went up to Dundee to celebrate my daughter's birthday with her. We had missed her birthday because of the COVID positive test, and so when we were finally both testing negative and were safe enough to go up, we went and visited her to celebrate her birthday late, and I didn't want to bring the big shawl with me, not least because of the mohair, and I think I was wearing black, and I knew I was going to get covered in mohair fibres, so I decided to leave the mohair at home, and instead I cast on something using this beautiful yarn that I picked up from Kathy's Knits, which is a local yarn shop here in Edinburgh. And this is Eden Cottage Yarns, and it's in Milburn 4-ply, which is a blend of BFL and silk. I think there's also a Milburn DK, but I got 2 skeins of the 4-ply, and they're 200 metres per ball. So I decided that would be enough to knit a ranunculus if I did it short sleeved. I was so inspired by my mum's, and if you did watch the previous episode, you'll have seen that she has done some spectacularly beautiful versions of that, and every single one is so different that I thought I would cast on one for myself, and I would kind of go off piste myself, and I would experiment with some different stitch patterns and things, which is what I was doing. But my problem with it is actually it's because it's 4-ply, because it's a silk blend, and it doesn't have any halo to it at all. As you'll see, it doesn't really have much of a halo. It's ending up just looking very stringy, and I really don't think this is actually the best use for the yarn. So I'm not going to continue on with this. I'm going to rip it back. I will probably knit another ranunculus at some point in the future and explore the stitch pattern idea that I had. But I think for this particular yarn, what I'm thinking it would be really lovely to knit is one of those ribbed camisoles. You've probably seen a lot of people knitting camisoles and little bralette tops in the summertime, and I think I wear camisoles every day, and I think it would be really lovely to have some that I had knitted myself in yarn that was this, well, I really like this wool silk blend actually, so I thought I might have a go. And I think at 400 metres I might just have enough to do the Ripple camisole by Jessie Maid. I've never knitted a Jessie Maid pattern before. She has lots of lovely ones, and I've heard really good things about her pattern writing style and about the fit. So I'm going to rip this back, I think, and perhaps cast on that. The other one I was thinking of was one of the camisole patterns by Kadri, and I've seen a couple of people knitting her designs. Casey over at Young Folks Knits has just done a test knit for Kadri, and I know that Rebecca of the Creabea podcast has also knitted some, so I am quite tempted to give that designer a go as well. So, and she has quite a few different options. So I'm going to have a wee look through, and I think that might be a future cast on, but really I've got plenty to be getting on with just now, so I'm not going to really push with that, and I'll circle back when I'm ready. Do you know, I will just say though, the one really lovely thing about, I had popped it in this little project bag that I have, and to take on the bus up to Dundee to visit my daughter, and I hadn't really looked at it until just now when I was getting all set up and prepared for the podcast. So I opened up the bag and took out the knitting to see what I had and to make a note of the name of the yarn, and discovered that I had left a chocolate bar in there, so I ate that before we started. Podcast fortification. so there you go, that was like a gift from my knitting. so there we go, that's my current works in progress, which is not entirely true. So I am going to be doing another video later on in August. I was approached by Hobby Yarn and asked if I would do a yarn review for them. And my impression of Hobby Yarn was that they mostly did acrylic yarns. And so I got back in touch with them and said, you know, I generally knit with natural fibres. So do you still think that it would be a good fit? And do you think that you would have some yarns that I would be able to choose from? And they said I could choose any yarn at all from their product range. So I had a good look through and I picked out some yarns, and they have sent those yarns to me. And I am now working up 2 pieces in those specific yarns to share with you and to give you my thoughts about the yarn itself. So I'm not going to share exactly what all my knitting time and energy is going into just now, but what I will say is that I'm really, really enjoying my projects. But what I'll say is that the project, the yarns are have been really lovely to work with. I'm going to give a full review in the next episode, and so if you want some sneaky peeks, you might find them on my Instagram page, which you'll find at Amy Palko. Again, link to that in the description box below. But I'm just going to hold on to those for just now and wait a little bit. But that's basically where all of my knitting energy and attention is going right now, and the ranunculus is being ripped back, and the long summer cardi is kind of on hold. So until I get through those. So that's what's on my needles. What's going to be next on my needles? Well, if you are a long-time viewer of The Meaningful Stitch, you will remember maybe a couple of episodes in, I knitted a pair of kilt hose. They are called the Lord of the Isles socks by Kate Davies, and they're a beautiful design. Kilt hose are basically those long kilt socks that men wear with their kilts. They come all the way up the leg, and then they've got a long cuff which gets folded over. They're held up with a piece of elastic, a garter that sits underneath the cuff, and then you've got a couple of pieces of fabric that matches the tartan of the kilt, and those are called the flashes. So basically it's a big knit because, generally men have bigger feet. So certainly the men I've been knitting for. So it's a big foot, it's the full calf, and then it's kind of like a double length cuff. It's knitted in DK weight yarn. I knitted the first pair for my son, my eldest son, my middle child, who was turning 21, just a few months after I started this podcast. I knitted them in West Yorkshire Spinners Essential DK in tartan green. That line of yarn was discontinued, unfortunately, because it was really perfect. And I say particularly unfortunately because the following year my daughter had since then trained to make kilts, and she had made a kilt for her partner, and they were going to his cousin's wedding and he wanted to wear his kilt, and so I knitted him a pair of kilt hose to go with it. So last year I also knitted a pair of Lord of the Isles socks in DK weight, and I used the Coop Socks Yeah DK in the colourway Dollis. Do not know why I remember all of this. I obviously just carry around all of this information in my head all the time. So again, it's a big knit. I am not a avid sock knitter, but I do believe in knitting things for my loved ones that I know they're going to love and they're going to wear. So, and I knew that Aurora's partner would really love these socks, and that they would sit really beautifully with his whole outfit. So I knitted that pair last year. Cue this year, and it's my youngest's 21st birthday. On the 21st birthday, we like to buy their kilt, and that includes their whole outfit that goes with it. So the jacket, the waistcoat, the shirt, kilt pin. They'll also have like their socks, their sporran, their ski and do, which is the little knife that sits down the length of the sock, and the shoes. So it's a it's a big outfit and it's a big outlay. It's a lot of money. So generally the family all comes together, the extended family, and everybody kind of contributes amount of money towards the full outfit. So this year my daughter is actually going to be making the kilt for my youngest, but it also does mean that I am now knitting another pair of kilt hose. And I asked my youngest what colour of kilt sock would he like to go with the tartan that he's chosen. The tartan that he's chosen is a Grant tartan, and it is really quite a bright one. The dominant colour is red, but he has chosen black. He would like black kilt hose to go, and they will look lovely. They will look really nice. But this is the same sun I've just knitted the black Albion by Michelle Wang. So if you go back maybe about 3 or 4 episodes, you'll see that in progress, which I gifted to him before he went away for the summer. But so yes, I've already done a lot of black knitting for this child. It's not really a child, you're 21, so. However, yes, he asked for black, and then not very long after that, I came across, one of my friends was doing a D-stash, and they had 3 balls of the West Yorkshire Spinners DK in black. It was like, it was meant to be. At that point, I knew I couldn't then go back to him and say, wouldn't you rather like, I don't know, like a green or a navy or, I don't know, a red? Imagine, no. So, although I think that would look pretty spectacular myself. But no, when I came across these balls of black DK, I knew it was perfect. Also, I had gone back and looked at when I had knitted with this yarn before, and I said on that podcast that I had broken into the second ball after the first, as I got towards the top of the first sock, and that I did actually need 3 balls. So I now have 3 balls of black DK yarn, and I will be knitting another pair of kilt hose. I am currently waiting for him to try and get hold of a tape measure so he can measure his feet, and then and then I will be able to make a start on these kilt hose. But his birthday is at the end of September, so I think once I get cracking on these other 2 projects that I'm currently working on with the hobby yarn, the next thing will be trying to get these kilt hose done. But that is what is next on my needles. It's not hugely exciting because, like I've been mentioning, I have already knitted 2 pairs of these, and you've seen both of those. So, but needs must. I am not knitting for the podcast. I am knitting and sharing my work on the podcast. So there we go. That is what's going to be next on my needles. But I have a lot of yarn and things that are new to me because I have been an incredibly lucky person and received 2 lovely gifts. When I got back from France, I received a package, and that was from a wonderful dyer, Libby from Needle and Thread, and she had packaged up some yarn that I had got from Perth Festival of Yarn, and it's their commemorative colourway, and it's called Imperfection. And when I saw it, I thought it was so aptly named because it truly is perfect. So they've got I got 2 of the 4-ply BFL nylon in Imperfection, and I got 3 of the Mohairs, and they very kindly sent it out to me because if you've ordered, this was all on a pre-order, which I think ended on the 4th of August. You could either opt for it to be sent out to you, I think at the end of this month, or you could pick it up from Perth. So even if you're not going to be there, you could still treat yourself. And it's absolutely gorgeous. Absolutely glorious. Look at that. I just thought it was so beautiful. So I have, like I said, 2 skeins of this and 3 skeins of this, but Libby surprised me very, very sweetly by including 3 skeins of a base that she's currently experimenting with, which I will show you. And she calls this colour Rose Mould because, and I bet she said in her letter about the colourway, she said it's her take on a rose gold but with olivey tones reminiscent of when the first signs of wilting begin. And she's absolutely captured it. This base is absolutely amazing. It is a fingering 4-ply at 350 metres per 100 gram. So maybe even a little bit closer to sport. 69% silk, 22% mohair and 9% polyamide. And Libby was saying that she thinks you could probably knit like one of those patterns that tells you to knit fingering 4-ply weight with a mohair. And actually you could just use this single instead and knit one of those projects. So I do not know yet what I'm going to do with this, but it is so beautiful that I know that I have to wait for exactly the right project before I cast it on. But there we go, that was what Libby sent me. And she also sent me this beautiful bag that her mum had made. It is so my colours. Like, oh, where is it? Look at the colours of my first Fantastitch and then look at this. Like they're made for each other. It is so lovely. It's lined, oh, there's Libby's card. Needle and thread. And it also got this really cool little notions purse that's attached, and it's got like a snapper to keep it closed. How cool is that? And some lovely stitch markers, as you can see there. So that's so sweet. Thank you so much, Libby. That was just, yeah, completely unexpected and a really lovely surprise. And now I have all of this glorious hand-dyed yarn, and I need to think of what I'm going to do with it. I was thinking the Perfection. I'm quite tempted to use 2 of the skeins of the fingering and 2 of the mohair to build a palette around for the floaty, which was one of the patterns in the Dreamscape issue of Pom Pom, which came out in the springtime of this year. I've had my eye on that, and I think that would be a really lovely birthday project for me this year. Alternatively, I'm very tempted to use the 4-ply as the secondary contrast colour for a Twigs by Junko Okamoto. So, which would mean I would have to buy like a main colour or figure out if I've got something in my stash that I could use as my main colour for Twigs, but I think that would also be really, really beautiful. So yes, some decisions to make, and then I got 3 because I always like to have like a really beautiful, look at that, a really beautiful skein of hand-dyed mohair, because I like to use that as a replacement sometimes for contrast colours in colour work, or you know, to really lift a colourway, a shawl, just as I have in the Fantastitch. So I have a skein to add to my stash for when I want to do something like that. So that was one amazing gift that I received, because the next day, the very next day, I was like, this must be my birthday. It's not. My birthday isn't till November. It just felt like it. Alma and Gudrun Ragnarsdottir from Iceland gave me a really lovely gift. Alma was over visiting in Edinburgh a couple of weeks ago, and she brought me some, I'll show it to you, she brought me some Plotalopi. Now, Plotalopi, you can get it, but it's not as certainly not as accessible as it is in Iceland. So I just Look at the colours. Look at the colours. Oh, oh dear, it smells so good. I might just have to pause momentarily while I sniff my yarn. So they very, very kindly gave me 4 plates of this gorgeous, oh there we go, this gorgeous purple. Look at the variation of colour in that. Is that not amazing? So I have 4 plates of this, 1 plate of this gorgeous dark red, and 1 of this beautiful orange, which you can see I'm quite fond of orange. And it's even got kind of like reddish rust fibres going through it as well. It is so beautiful. I am kind of thinking that I want to do one of the dresses from Gudrun Johnson's The Shetland Trader Book 3. I've already knitted a couple of patterns from that. I knitted the Vare and I knitted the Maywick, but I am thinking that maybe one of the dresses in Plotolopi would be amazing for the winter time. Would certainly keep me very cosy. So that's what I'm thinking about possibly doing with that, but that plan may still change. But they also gave me these really lovely stitch markers. They've obviously got my number, hey? These lovely full red wine glasses. And this lovely bag, which is made by Gudrun. This is her card here. Gudrun, there she is there. And she has an Etsy shop that I'm going to link to in the description box. But how lovely is that? And this has got the projects that I'm working on just now that I'm not quite ready to show you. But yes, it's a lovely bag too. And it was just the perfect size to take to knit night with my 2 projects in it. So that's why I'm already using it, because I was waiting to show it to all of you before I used it. And then on Monday I was like, oh, I'm just gonna, it's just too perfect. So there we go, that's that. And it also gave me this amazing book. Can you believe this? I have not yet cracked open this chocolate. Partially because the packaging is so beautiful that I'm kind of loath to, but then I know how good Icelandic chocolate is, so I will be cracking this open very soon, but I did manage to hold off until I got to show it to you. So it's sea salted toffee chocolate, so I'm excited to have a try of that. So that was my gifts. How incredibly generous. Thank you so much. It was honestly such a surprise, and just feel incredibly touched, incredibly blessed, to be met so beautifully by you, and yeah. So thank you. Okay, so what do we have next? I think we are on to what is bringing me joy, and actually that's quite a long list. One of the things that's bringing me joy is there is a new plant shop. A plant shop, let's just call it a plant shop. There's a new plant shop that's opened up quite close to me, and I decided I wanted to pop in and have a little look. I actually discovered that they'd opened while I was away on holiday, so I'd been following them on Instagram. They're called Green. They already have a shop over the other side of town, but they have now opened up one in Leith. And so I've been following them on Instagram with the intention to visit when I got home, and then of course we couldn't go anywhere. So as soon as I was allowed back out and about, I made a point of popping in, and I bought myself this beautiful plant here. It is an Ox Alice. I've called her Alice, obviously. But she is really lovely. She's very responsive to light. So her leaves open up. You can see how they're doing that already here. This one here. And these ones are still a bit closed just now, but I'll pop her over on the windowsill just shortly and she'll really open up again. But I am really pleased with this incredibly beautiful plant. And yeah, so that's certainly bringing me a lot of joy. My other plants are also bringing me a lot of joy. I had received a tip from a viewer to add coffee grounds to my hibiscus and to the soil, and so I did that, and oh my goodness, she has bloomed so much since then. Right now she has at least 3 blooms open with lots of other buds, and she is just absolutely glorious, and she is clearly loving the coffee. It has awoken her. So she's doing really well. My window boxes are blooming with gorgeous geraniums. The Purl, beautiful Purl, the rubber plant, has just pushed out a new leaf just today. So yeah, my plants are absolutely one of the things that are bringing me just a huge amount of joy. We were actually away this last weekend. We went down to, you would have seen if you were following me on Instagram, that we were down in York for the weekend. We went down to a friend's wedding, which was held in the Merchant Adventurers Hall, which is one of the oldest medieval guild halls. It's 660 years old, and it was a spectacular venue for a wedding. It was really, really lovely. It was fun to catch up with old friends and to meet some new ones, and the whole experience was just a complete delight. On the Saturday, Frank and I decided that we were going to do the walk around the city walls. York has a city wall trail which is about 2 miles long all the way around the city, around the inner part of the city, which we had never really explored properly before, so we did that. At one of the gates, which is called Walmgate, there is a really wonderful place for a really wonderful cafe. I think it's called Gatehouse Coffee, and it's actually inside the old gate in the wall. So and they served amazing coffee. And while I was there, I met a lovely viewer called Jen. Hi Jen. It was so lovely to meet you, and yeah, highly recommend that wee cafe. It was completely delightful, and I sat and I knitted for a bit, and it was just the peace and quiet and downtime that I needed. So felt beautifully well met there. And then on the Sunday we headed back home again. So it was just a really lovely trip. We actually have another trip coming up because we finished watching The Last Kingdom, which, if you have not watched it, it's on Netflix. I think it started off as a BBC production and then Netflix took it on. And it's kind of based in the 800s in mostly set in Wessex, but set in various different kingdoms in England. And it's about kind of the creation of a nation state of England, and it follows the fates and fortunes of one particular character called Uhtred, son of Uhtred, and he is also known as Uhtred of Bebbanburg. And at the very end, it was a good series. I enjoyed it. I thought the last season was a little bit plodding and a little bit one note, but I thought the final episode was really, really excellent and really tied it all together really well. Turns out Bebbanburg is actually Bamborough, and Bamborough is actually only an hour and a half's drive away from Edinburgh. And so we did a little bit of Googling after watching the final episode, and we discovered that there is an incredibly beautiful beach there and a fantastic castle. So we are going down for a day trip with the family, and so I don't think Uhtred will be there, but the castle will. Not the same castle that you see in the series, but it looks absolutely amazing. So we're going down to do that. So that feels very joyful. The other thing we've been watching on television has been Stranger Things. Everybody's talking about Stranger Things right now, I know, but we had watched the first season when it came out initially, and then for some reason we hadn't watched seasons 2 or 3, and then season 4 had come out, and I just heard there was a huge amount of very positive buzz around it. And so I had said to Frank, will we watch season 2, seeing as we already watched season 1? And he said he couldn't remember what happened in season 1. It was so long ago. So we went back and we rewatched season 1. It made a lot more sense actually, having watched it the second time, and continued on and watched season 2, 3 and 4. In fact, I think we got through all 4 over the course of about a 2.5 week period, and we absolutely loved it. We so enjoyed it. The characterization is wonderful. The acting is really, really good, particularly from the younger actors, I would say. Although Winona Ryder is just a phenomenal force of nature, and it's so good to see her actually in the show and doing so well and such good work. So we really enjoyed it. For me, it felt like it was the best of like 1980s Stephen King. You know, really great storytelling and the wonderful camaraderie between the kids, and just enough of the supernatural to unsettle you and leave you on edge, but very exciting as well, like a full story arc. I really loved all of the 80s nostalgia, actually. I was born towards the end of the 70s, so I was a young child through the 80s and really a teen through the 1990s. But you know, some of my earliest memories are obviously of that particular decade, and the music is very much the music of my childhood, and so it was fun to revisit all of that. And actually, when I got to the end of the 4th season, you know, you have that kind of, it's almost like when you've like got to the end of a really good book, but you've got sort of like a book hangover, and you don't really want to leave the story world, the storyverse that's been created. That's very much how I felt about Stranger Things. So I started to find videos and things that I could watch on YouTube that, you know, they explored it a little bit further, whether it was interviews or whether it was profiles or that kind of thing. The two that I really enjoyed, and the two that I'm going to link to in the show notes, was GQ did a special on the costumes with the costume designer. And it looks at the different colour palettes that were used to create the different settings used in season 4. And then it also went through the individual characters and particular outfits that they wore and how they put those together and what the inspiration for those were. It was about half an hour video, and it was very in depth, and I really liked that. So I'm going to link to that. And then that led me on to another video, which was a fashion historian that was looking at the accuracy of the costumes that were used, the outfits and the fashion that was used, comparing it to what you would expect to have seen, say, between the years of 1983 and 1986. So yeah, I'll share links to both of those. But like I said, the other big thing has been the music, and you know, you've probably been hearing Kate Bush's Running Up That Hill everywhere, and Stranger Things is the reason why. But Kate Bush has always been one of my favourite artists, and so it really kind of reignited my love for her, and I've been listening to the Spotify This Is Kate Bush playlist when I'm out and about. I've been really enjoying that. And it's also, if I was going to recommend this, I've not rewatched it again for years, but I think I might. There's a Kate Bush documentary which was done by the BBC. It's about an hour long, and it is up on YouTube, so I will also link to that. So if you are a fan of Kate Bush, whether you've been a long time fan or you're just coming to her brand new, then I think you might really enjoy that particular documentary. So I will link to that too. Also on a music note, the Mercury Music Prize shortlist is out. The Mercury Music Prize is the prize given to Best British Album of the year. The shortlist is always really interesting. It's always very eclectic. There's always some folk, there's some pop, there'll be some rock, some rap, there'll be some jazz. There's always a really wide selection of genres to go and explore. And I would say I've probably found some of my most favourite artists through the Mercury Music Prize shortlist. So I am enjoying going through that. And I noticed that one of my favourite new albums has also been included, which is wonderful. And it's Jessie Buckley and Bernard Butler's album, which is called For All the Days That Tear the Heart. It is quite folky, good storytelling kind of songs. I really, really liked it. I think if you like Laura Marling, then I think you will probably really like this album. It's really, really lovely. And there's some YouTube clips as well where you can see them performing too. So it's nice to see them getting honoured. So that's a lovely thing. And I'll be exploring the rest of the shortlist over the next few weeks, I expect. The other thing that I have coming up this weekend is Bannock Yarn, which is a new yarn festival that is happening in Bannockburn House on the outskirts of Stirling. Now, this is a brand new event. It is being hosted and run by Koori Creative, which have a shop in the Marches, which is the main shopping mall in the centre of Stirling. So I think they took that on a couple of years ago, maybe 18 months ago, and now they're having this particular event. So there's lots of really interesting vendors. I'm going to go along with my aunties. I'm really excited about it. We got the ticket that allowed earlier access and also includes the tour. So if you're going to be there on Saturday, please do pop over and say hi. It would be lovely to meet you. I will be looking out for, I think, some yarn to knit a lento with. I'm also buying some yarn as gifts, and I'm also, weirdly, I'm going to buy some sock yarn. I don't know if you watch Ruth Loves to Knit podcast. I love it, and if you're not watching it, you absolutely should be. But she mentioned that there is this charity that is taking in donations of hand knit yellow socks for hospice. So I wanted to knit 2 pairs of socks, 2 pairs of yellow socks for this particular charity, and so I want to pick up yarn for both of those. So I will add in more information about that down below as well. But I will also be picking up something to give away here, so that you can get a little bit of a taste of Bannock yarn while perhaps not actually being able to make it along. So this will be, at the end of this month, it will be the 2-year podiversary. Ridiculous word. Anniversary of the podcast. So I thought it might be really nice to put together a little giveaway package of things that I'm picking up from Bannock Yarn this weekend. So if you would like to enter into that giveaway, you just need to leave a comment down below telling me something about your relationship to this podcast. You know, what have you enjoyed about it? Has it inspired your knitting? Is there something that you've cast on because you've seen it here? So that would be really lovely. So if you want to enter into the podcast giveaway for the 2nd anniversary and receive some goodies from Bannock Yarn, then please do just leave a comment, and I will pick a name from the list of comments before I record next time, and we'll share that with you in the next episode. Okay, anything else? Oh yes, Instagram has got a really lovely it's not a new account, but it's new to me account, and it is a Zen webcomic called The Ox-Herd Boy. I don't know if you know it, but it's really, really sweet, so you might want to give that a wee follow because that's been bringing me joy. It's made by a beautiful artist, and she is a contemporary Chinese painter called Regina Link, and so you might want to go and check her out. It's you can follow both the main account and you can follow her personal account, and you see the behind the scenes creation of the images at her personal account. So I really enjoyed that. And then I just want to share with you really 5 podcasts that I've been really enjoying. The first is The Nitty Stew, which is Leanne, and she's based over in Canada, and she's cabin crew. So the stew refers to stewardess, and she travels all over Canada, and she visits yarn shops, and she gives you a little bit of travel footage of the places that she's visiting, and she's also a really beautiful knitter and a very lovely companion to sit and knit with. So if you haven't discovered the Nitty Stew yet, then I think you would really enjoy her. Then another new podcast, which is Knitting a Good Yarn, which is with Carmen and Jackie. They are, well, I think their first one was episode 0.5 and their second episode was 0.75, and they're hoping to do their first podcast proper next month, I think. But really, the first 2 episodes are absolutely stand as proper episodes. So they are launching a really fun cal called Inspired by Anna, which is a colour work cal as in a knit-along. And they are really championing working with unspun yarn. So there's a lot of tips and tricks and advice and recommendations on how to work with unspun yarn. So if that's new to you, or even if you have done it before, and I expect you can always learn more. I know I can. So you might want to go and check them out. I was so fortunate that Carmen was over in Edinburgh and she gave me a little shout out, and we were COVID free and able to leave the flat. So I was able to meet up with Carmen and we had a lovely long blether, and we went to Ginger Twist, and then after that we went and had a glass of wine, and it was just a complete delight to see you, Carmen. So I hope that you continue to enjoy your time here in the UK and that you have a safe journey home, and absolutely looking forward to seeing you and Jackie again in your next episode. The next one I wanted to share with you is called Fibre Chats, and it's by Arina Shah, and she interviews various different people who are involved in the fibre arts. And she interviewed me. So Arina Shah got in touch with me last month, I think it was, and asked if I would be interested, and I said yes, of course. So we recorded an interview a couple of weeks ago, and I think she said it will be up in August sometime. So I will be sharing about that as it happens as it's published on my Instagram, and I will absolutely be linking to that in the next episode also. So that was very exciting. But apart from my upcoming episode, please go and visit her, because she has so many wonderful interviews with a wide variety of people. Some are podcasters, some are yarn dyers, but also, she's got people who are involved in all different types of fibre-related arts and crafts. So absolutely go and have an explore, meet some new artists, meet some new crafters, make some new friends, and be inspired. And she's really creating such an amazing resource, really like a library of people to go and explore. And her interviews are very thoughtful. She asks such wonderful questions. She's very curious in her questioning, and but very, very compassionate as also. So she was a really lovely interviewer, and the whole experience for me was a delight. And you can really see in her interviews with others that they're also really enjoying them too. So yeah, check out Fibre Chats. Then Woolly Witchcraft, who's Brogan over in Glasgow, did a podcast for the first time in quite a long time, and it was just so lovely to see her that I just wanted to give her a wee shout out. Hi Brogan. and yeah, so if you haven't discovered the Woolly Witchcraft podcast yet, then please go and do that. She's just so much fun to hang out with. She's got such a lovely sunny nature about her that I think you'll really enjoy. And then last of all, the Stricker Chick, who is Samantha. And Samantha is a new podcaster. I think she's been knitting for a couple of years, and she's been designing, I think, for the last year. And I'm honestly astonished that she's only been knitting for such a short time, because her knitting is astonishing. And her level of design work is really very accomplished. She is living and studying in Tromsø, in the north of Norway, and so you'll see some footage of that as well, and it's an incredibly beautiful part of the world, so that's recommended. And again, she's just got such a lovely nature about her. She's got a very lovely way about her. She's very easy to listen to, and just beautiful knitting to feel inspired by also. So there you go, those are my 5 podcaster tips, and that kind of really brings us, I suppose, to the end of the podcast. So I'm just going to do a little poem to close, and I chose this one from The Prophet by Kahlil Gibran, which is a wonderful, wonderful book. I had a reading from this at my wedding, actually. But the one that I wanted to read you from today is when the prophet is asked to speak about work. And he says, "And what is it to work with love? It is to weave the cloth with threads drawn from your heart, even as if your beloved were to wear that cloth. It is to build a house with affection, even as if your beloved were to dwell in that house. It is to sow seeds with tenderness and reap the harvest with joy, even as if your beloved were to eat the fruit. It is to charge all things you fashion with a breath of your own spirit, and to know that all blessed dead are standing about you and watching. Often have I heard you say, as if speaking in sleep, 'He who works in marble and finds the shape of his own soul in the stone is nobler than he who ploughs the soil. And he who seizes the rainbow to lay it on a cloth in the likeness of man is more than he who makes the sandals for our feet.' But I say, not in sleep, but in over-wakefulness of noontide, that the wind speaks not more sweetly to the giant oaks than to the least of all the blades of grass. And he alone is great who turns the voice of the wind into a song made sweeter by his own loving. Work is love made visible." So, the work of our hands, the work of our hearts, may it all come together into beauty and into loveliness, and may you feel well met by your practice, by your knitting practice, by your crafting practice, by your work. Okay, my darlings, I will speak to you all again really soon. Take good care.